I emerged from a 2-year coma to discover my wife had built a new life with my brother. Now, I'm determined to reclaim everything I lost. I'm a 34-year-old man who, until 2 years ago, believed I had the perfect life. A devoted wife, a thriving career, and a tight-knit family. My wife, Sarah, and I had been married for 6 years, eagerly planning to have children. My younger brother, Ethan, was my closest confidant. We'd been inseparable since childhood. Everything seemed perfect. But in a single moment, my world shattered. It was a stormy Friday night. I was driving home from work, drained from a grueling week, when a truck veered across the road and crashed into my car. The last thing I recall is the shriek of tires and a dazzling burst of headlights. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines, clueless about how much time had passed. The doctors informed me I'd been in a coma for 2 years. 2 entire years. Waking up wasn't like the movies. I couldn't just leap out of bed and resume my life. My body was frail, my muscles wasted from 2 years of stillness. It took weeks of grueling therapy to wiggle my fingers or toes. Sarah was there daily, assisting with my exercises, but something felt wrong. She seemed detached, almost reluctant to be near me. Then there was Ethan. He came to see me often, but an odd strain hung between us, something I couldn't pinpoint. I chalked it up to the stress of my situation. After all, they'd endured a nightmare waiting for me to wake up. But when I was transferred to a rehab facility, I began noticing red flags. Sarah would slip out of the room whenever Ethan arrived, and I'd catch them murmuring in the corridor, as if guarding a secret. One day, while Sarah stepped out for coffee, Ethan left his phone on the bedside table. It buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. A message from Sarah popped up: "We need to discuss us." My stomach churned. I didn't want to believe it, but the clues were mounting. Days later, I overheard them arguing in the hallway. Sarah's voice was hushed but sharp. "What do we do now?" she snapped. Ethan sighed heavily. "I don't know, Sarah. We can't act like nothing's changed." My mind spun. Act like nothing's changed? What were they hiding? The truth hit me when Sarah left her tablet unlocked in my room. I found photos of them together. Messages brimming with affection and plans. Hotel bookings. My wife and my brother had been entangled in an affair for years, and while I was fighting to survive in that hospital bed, they'd been living together, assuming I'd never wake up. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. How could they do this to me? To our family? I wanted to confront them, to unleash my fury. But I held back. Instead, I observed them closely. I listened carefully. And I began to plot. If they thought they could erase me from their lives, they were gravely mistaken. I was going to take back everything they'd taken: my wife, my family, my life. And I'd ensure they regretted ever crossing me. After uncovering the truth about Sarah and Ethan, I knew I couldn't face them yet. I was still too frail, too reliant on them during my recovery. But I wasn't powerless. I started scrutinizing their actions, noting every misstep, every hint of guilt. Sarah would leave the room whenever Ethan called, and Ethan avoided my gaze when Sarah was nearby. It was as if they existed in their own secret bubble, and I was just an inconvenient shadow from their past. I pieced together their timeline. Their affair began roughly a year after my accident. At first, it was emotional, late-night calls, clandestine meetups. But by the time I awoke, they were practically a couple. Sarah had moved into Ethan's place, and they were envisioning a future without me. The more I uncovered, the more my anger grew, but I kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. My first move was to collect evidence. I needed undeniable proof of their deception, something I could use to expose them. Sarah left her tablet in my room again, and this time I copied everything: messages, photos, emails. I even found a shared calendar detailing their secret rendezvous. It was all there, undeniable and damning. But I needed more. I needed to witness it myself. During a therapy session, I overheard Sarah on the phone with Ethan. She thought I was asleep, but I caught every word. They were planning a weekend escape to a cabin in the hills. It was my chance. I played the part of the weak patient, but inside I was scheming. On the day of their trip, Sarah claimed she had a work trip, and Ethan said he was too busy to visit. I wasn't fooled. As soon as they left, I contacted an old friend, James, my college roommate, and one of the few people I still trusted. I shared everything and asked for his help. He didn't hesitate. We drove to the cabin together, armed with a camera and a plan. When we arrived, it was exactly as I'd feared. Sarah and Ethan were there, laughing and embracing, carefree. We stayed out of sight, recording every moment. It was agonizing to watch, but I couldn't turn away. This was the evidence I needed. Back at the hospital, I began dropping subtle hints. I'd mentioned the cabin, the hills, even the exact dates of their trip. Sarah and Ethan exchanged nervous looks but stayed silent. They thought they were safe, that I was too weak and disoriented to suspect anything. But I was growing stronger every day, physically and mentally, and I was ready to act. One evening, at a family dinner at my parents' house, I decided the time had come. Sarah and Ethan were there, acting as if everything was fine. My parents were thrilled to see my progress, but I could tell they sensed the unease in the room. After dinner, I stood and addressed the group. "I have something to share," I said, my voice firm. Sarah and Ethan stiffened, their faces draining of color. I handed the tablet to my parents. "Look at this." As my parents scrolled through the messages and photos, the room grew deathly quiet. Sarah broke down, pleading for forgiveness, but it was too late. Ethan tried to justify himself, but my father silenced him. "How could you betray your own brother?" he demanded, his voice trembling with rage. My mother was sobbing, unable to process the truth. It was chaos, but I felt an odd calm. This was only the start. Exposing Sarah and Ethan's affair was just the beginning. The aftermath was swift. My parents were heartbroken, and Sarah moved out of our home that night, leaving a note. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore." Ethan tried to paint himself as a victim, claiming he and Sarah had grown close while grieving my absence. I wasn't convinced. They'd made their choices, and now they'd face the consequences. But I wasn't done. I wanted to dismantle their lives completely, and I had a plan. My first step was to cut them off from everything. I hired a forensic accountant to dig into our finances, and the findings were staggering. Sarah had been draining our joint accounts for months, funding her new life with Ethan, vacations, lavish dinners, even a down payment on a car for him. Worse, she'd taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge, using the funds to buy Ethan a high-end condo. I filed for divorce immediately, and with the evidence, the judge awarded me full control of our assets. Sarah was left with nothing. No home, no car, no savings. She tried to argue she deserved half because she'd stayed by my side during my coma, but the judge dismissed her claims. I leaked details of her financial misconduct to the media, and soon she faced criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. But I wasn't finished. I wanted to strip them of everything they cherished, leaving them with nothing. My next target was Sarah's deepest passion, her dream of becoming a best-selling author. She'd been working on a novel for years, pouring her heart into it. While I was in a coma, she'd secured a publishing deal, using our savings to fund her book launch. But I had access to her laptop the whole time. I copied her manuscript and made some changes. On the day of her book launch, I released an altered version online. It wasn't her story, it was their story. I'd rewritten it as a thinly disguised tale of her affair with Ethan, including real messages and photos as extra content. The book went viral overnight, but not for the reasons Sarah wanted. Readers were appalled, and the publisher canceled her contract. Her dream was shattered, leaving her with only humiliation. Next, I targeted Ethan. He'd always cared deeply about his reputation, especially in our small hometown where our family name carried weight. I uncovered that Ethan had been skimming funds from a charity he'd started in our father's name, meant to support disadvantaged kids. Instead, he'd used the money to bankroll his extravagant life with Sarah. I compiled the evidence and sent it to the local news with a heartfelt letter exposing his crimes. The story dominated headlines, and Ethan was arrested within days. His reputation was ruined, and the charity was dissolved, leaving him with a tarnished name and crushing legal fees. But the final blow was yet to come. I contacted Sarah and Ethan separately, pretending to offer them a way out. I told Sarah I'd forgive her if she testified against Ethan in court. I told Ethan I'd drop the charges if he publicly admitted Sarah had manipulated him into the affair. I wanted to pit them against each other. They both fell for it, desperate to save themselves. The trial was everything I'd envisioned. Sarah took the stand first, her voice shaky as she recounted her side of the story. She portrayed herself as a victim, claiming Ethan had lured her during a vulnerable time and coerced her into the affair. "He exploited me," she wept. "I was grieving, and he preyed on my weakness. He ruined everything." The courtroom was hushed as Sarah spoke, her words heavy. Then Ethan took the stand, his face red with anger. "That's a lie," he shouted, pointing at Sarah. "She's the one who approached me. She said she was miserable in her marriage and wanted out. She used me." Sarah leapt to her feet, furious. "You're the liar," she screamed. "You told me he'd never wake up. You said we could be together." Ethan fired back, his voice venomous. "And you believed me because it suited you. You didn't care about him. You just wanted his money." The courtroom descended into chaos as Sarah and Ethan tore into each other, their accusations growing louder and more vicious. They shouted, pointed, and even tried to lunge at each other before the bailiff stepped in. It was a spectacle no one would forget, a public implosion of their lies, greed, and betrayal. With Sarah and Ethan's lives in tatters, I finally felt at peace. Sarah had lost everything, her career, her reputation, and any chance of rebuilding. She fled to another state, hoping for a fresh start, but the scandal followed her. Ethan was serving a 5-year sentence for embezzlement and fraud. His reputation was destroyed, and our parents disowned him, unable to forgive his betrayal. The most satisfying part was knowing their relationship was obliterated. Sarah and Ethan despised each other, each blaming the other for their downfall. They'd never recover, destined to live with the consequences of their greed and disloyalty. With Sarah and Ethan gone, I focused on rebuilding my life. I sold the house we'd shared and used the money to start anew. I relocated to a quiet coastal town, ready to leave the past behind. My parents and I worked to mend our relationship. It was tough, there was pain and distrust to overcome, but we slowly rebuilt our bond. They apologized for not seeing the truth sooner, and I forgave them, knowing they'd been deceived just as I had. Life surprised me in unexpected ways. A year after the trial, I received a letter from Sarah. She expressed remorse for her actions, admitting Ethan had manipulated her from the start. She said she'd been in a dark place after my accident and made terrible choices but was trying to rebuild her life. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only wanted me to know she regretted everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Her words didn't erase the past, but they gave me closure. I had moved on, free from the pain she and Ethan caused. Today, I'm in a better place. I've found love again with someone who truly values me. We're planning a family, and I'm excited for what lies ahead. Sarah and Ethan are mere shadows of the past, a reminder of how far I've come and how resilient I am. Looking back, I have no regrets about my actions. I reclaimed what was mine and ensured Sarah and Ethan paid for their betrayal. More importantly, I proved to myself I could rise above anything. Life knocked me down, but I stood back up, stronger than ever. That's a victory no one can take from me.